when I was a kid, I went to a summer camp as a camper, and it was at this summer camp that God had a profound impact on my life. And it was because of this play, this moving play around the property, that I really came to know Jesus. And this play was called the Jesus Walk. And essentially, what happened was that all of the counselors and the staff members at this camp would each pretend they would play a role as actors and actresses, um, that was in Jesus' life. So some counselor would be Jesus, some of the counselors would be Peter, James, John, Andrew. There would be a Mary Magdalene. There would be a Mary, mother of Jesus. There would be a Pontius Pilate, and this play moved around the acres of the camp to reenact the life of Jesus. And I'm not sure exactly what it was, but the year I was a teen camper, I was 15 or 16 years old. My counselor played Jesus, and I'll never forget a couple of things. One was that uh, he was just beaten. I know that might sound strange, but Jesus, when he carried the cross, was beaten by Roman soldiers. And in this reenactment, this play, my counselor was Jesus, and he bore the cross across this field, and the guards, the soldiers, kept coming in, and they would press down on the cross until he couldn't carry it. He would fall down, and it created this very real picture of, probably in part, what Jesus went through. And I remember after the play was over, sitting and talking with the counselor and just asking him, like, "Hey, did that hurt? Did it bother you?" He said, "Yeah, it hurt. The cross has a real bite to the shoulder, when it comes down on you." He said, "But it just reminds me a little bit of what Jesus did for me." And that spoke so clearly to me. It changed so much of my own thinking around who Jesus was, and maybe even the reality of the story that I had heard my whole life. It was just an incredible picture of the power of drama, the power of the story of the gospel, using drama as a tool to bring young people to know who Jesus was. And now I tell you all that to say that when I became 17, I became a staff member, a summer staff member at this camp, and I got to participate in this thing called the Jesus Walk for the very first time. And my first summer, I got to play one of the disciples. I think I was James. I'm not really sure that I remember anymore. Um, we did this play once a week, and we always prayed and hoped that the weather would be good, because if the weather wasn't good, if it rained, well, then you can't do an outdoor play. You have to do it inside. And it always felt like the inside version of the Jesus Walk was just much less powerful than the outside version. You didn't take a boat out on the lake when the disciples are called in the indoor version. But in the outdoor version, you could actually do that. And the kids gathered around the lake, and it became that much more real. In the indoor version, you couldn't have Jesus with a cross, because there isn't a cross on the inside of the buildings there, but there was one on the outside, and it seemed much more real. And I just remember a couple of times during that summer, it would threaten rain. And sometimes it did rain. And I remember feeling really upset. Like, I can't I can't believe that it would rain on this night. I can't believe that God would bring the rain when all we want to do is do this play to make the kids laugh, but also to make them fall in love with who Jesus was in a way that we had fallen in love with who Jesus was. We get pretty upset about it, actually. I'll never forget that first summer on staff that, like, the counselor, my fellow staff member, only a couple years older than I was, who played Jesus that summer, pulled us all aside, and he essentially rebuked our attitudes. He said, "Guys, remember who we do this for. We do this whole play for Jesus. We do this for God, and God brings the rain. Why are you upset if it rains on this day? It must mean that God has a plan for us to do this thing inside." Those words will ring in my ears and bounce off the inside of my skull forever. because it speaks such a deep truth. There are so many times in my life where my life has not gone according to the plan that I think it should go to. Um, Essentially, the rain has come in a time that I didn't expect or I didn't want, or I had all these plans laid out in a way that I was going to honor and glorify God, and then the rains came. Yeah, the probably biggest example for that is just the loss of my children. Boy, the rains came. I couldn't have expected such a different result than the one that I had planned. We all have stuff, I mean, bad stuff that happens in our lives. And sometimes that stuff happens when our whole life is just going wrong. And sometimes that stuff happens out of the clear blue sky when everything seems to be going right. And we just ask ourselves, why in the world would that be happening now? God, I redevoted my life to you. I dedicated myself to you. I just took this new position that was going to be a wonderful way for me to share my faith. I just made this new friend that, or this person just came to know who you are, and now you're taking them away from me. And it feels like, my goodness, this is not going according to plan. It feels like the rains are coming and we're upset. The honest truth of the matter is that as we mature in our Christian faith, and this is a hard thing to say, this is a hard thing for me to say, especially with the loss that I've had in my own life, but as we mature in our Christian faith, one of the things that we have to come to understand is that we live this life for God. And there's some sort of intent for us to, in the midst of the rain, still honor Him. Somehow, still honor Him. I recently came across this movie on Amazon Prime called Risen. I don't know that it's that new, but it's actually got some pretty serious actors in it. And it's the story of the resurrection, the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. And it kind of reminds me of the Jesus walk a little bit. But it's told from the perspective of a Roman soldier who has been tasked with finding the body of the risen Jesus to prove that the disciples had stolen his body and he did not really rise. And so, as this Roman soldier interviews the disciples and Mary Magdalene and the people who are talking about this risen Savior, he actually eventually comes to encounter the risen Jesus. And it changes his whole life. But in this movie, there's a scene where the disciples, they've already encountered the risen Jesus once or twice, but they go out on the lake and they're fishing, hoping that they'll see Jesus again. And they're casting their nets over the side of the boat, and the nets become so weighted down that most of the disciples think it must be caught on a rock. And Peter stands tall and turns around when this happens and looks to the shore, and he sees a figure standing on the shore. And for him, he is certain that is Jesus. And all the disciples are saying, we have to loose the nets. We're caught on rocks. We're stuck. And he's saying it's fish. And he's saying it quietly, and he gets louder. It's fish. It's fish. It's fish. And he finally, they turn to say, how do you know? And he says, because there's Jesus. And he jumps over the side of the boat and runs, swims, wades to the shore to find Jesus. And the other disciples joyfully join him. And I think about that scene. It captures something beautiful to me. That in the aftermath of watching Jesus be crucified, of knowing that their teacher's dead, of knowing that this movement that they've given the last number of years of their lives to is halted, dead in its tracks. The Romans have won. The Pharisees have won. Somehow they encounter the risen Jesus and they're given hope. And then they have this joyous moment where they're fishing and they encounter him again and they're given great hope and joy in the midst of something that feels so savagely destructive. Life is so hard. And it's like this incredibly beautiful thing. You know, I sit here today and I'm looking out at the church building and the grass and the trees, and I just think how lucky we are to have all of this beautiful yard where kids can play. This God just He has taken care of us and blessed us. But in the midst of blessing, in the midst of recognizing the beauty of life, truth of the matter is life is also really hard. It can be really painful. Maybe that's because of loss or Maybe it's because of decisions that we've made. Maybe it's because of no decision that we've made, but something terrible that's happened to us. Maybe it's because of violence in the world, tragedy that goes on around us. It's because of division that exists in the world today, and it also divides our soul. Life is hard. I want to encourage you today to remember that in the midst of things being hard and life being difficult, there are these moments of joy that are so deep and so profound that we want to just throw ourselves over the side of the boat and run to the shore to embrace Jesus. I want to challenge you to look for the moments where you can embrace Jesus, even if you are struggling today, even if you are hurting today, even if your best friend is going through something and they're hurting and you are the person walking with them and you feel like you're at the end of your rope because you have no more answers. Remember that there are these moments where we can look to find Jesus standing there, waiting for us to embrace him. The rain falls on the good and evil alike. The rain serves as a reminder that God is there and that God is blessing us. The rain serves as a lesson. Sometimes as a blessing, sometimes as a tragedy. All meant to draw us closer to him. All meant to bring us into a relationship with him. All meant to bring us to this moment where we can look out and see there's Jesus waiting for that embrace. Hope you have a great day.